Now transport of the future, and reports from Britain and France on high-speed trains. First of all, Britain, and the last run for the revolutionary hovertrain. The train is powered by a linear electric motor and floats on a cushion of air. During this test, it reached 104 miles an hour against a 20-knot headwind. The scientists who designed the train intended this demonstration to mark the end of the first phase of development. Instead, after 6 years' work and £5 million, the government has withdrawn its backing. The reason? Nobody wanted to buy it. Apart from the lack of customers, the government was also worried about future development costs. The hovertrain project needed an immediate £4 million to keep the research going, but it was clear that much more would be needed later. The government, having learned its lesson from the escalating costs of the Concorde project, was understandably nervous about making yet another open-ended financial commitment. The hovertrain design was years ahead of its time, but the research won't all be lost. What will survive is the revolutionary linear motor that would have driven the 100-passenger vehicle along at 300 miles an hour. Its designer is Professor Laithwaite, who's now developed an even more advanced motor. He explains how it works.
This is a linear motor, and that's just a fancy name for a row of electromagnets. This is a sheet of aluminium. When I put it on the motor and switch on the magnets, something pretty dramatic occurs. I try and put it back now. You see, I can hold it with finger and thumb because it tries to float. But it isn't stable sideways. If I get it a bit off center, it tends to fly off. Let it go, and there you have propulsion without physical contact. But of course, it would be very expensive to have hundreds of miles of this, so we turn it upside down. We make this the motor on the vehicle, and this the track. So you can have hundreds of miles of that because it's cheap.
In practice, the metal plate is the track, and even without the air cushion, the train could still be suspended above the track.
First of all, it will levitate or support an aluminium plate. It will guide it this time sideways, and it will also propel it along. Now we can put a vehicle on this aluminium plate and see what a train of the future might look like. I need a little more voltage for this. And there you have your modern vehicle being guided, lifted, and propelled, all by means of the same set of coils.
What future do you really see? What practical future do you see for this motor?
Well, linear motors, of course, have many applications, and I am director of a company which manufactures them for sliding doors, travelling cranes, lifts, all manner of things, parcel sorting. If you come to London Airport, your baggage is handled by a linear motor. I don't know if you knew that. But the high-speed game is, of course, the exciting one, and this is really what I'm concerned about now.
Now, high-speed gaming, what are you talking in terms of? Rail, is it a very expensive project to build special track? And this
Whenever you want to go faster, it will always cost you more. You can be sure of that. And look at the Tokaido line. They spend 8 hours a day in grinding the track back into shape after 16 hours running. But this is the businessman's train. This takes the businessman out of the centre of the city to the workers instead of trying to commute 1 million workers into the city. This makes sense.
Good sense or not, the British have decided they won't be needing a 300-mile-an-hour train for the next 15 years at least. And ironically, the linear motor is now being taken over by a firm developing low-speed engines for urban transport. The end of the line for the hovertrain does not mean the end of high-speed rail travel in Britain. British Rail is developing an advanced passenger train, or APT, capable of 150 miles an hour using existing track and signalling. The secret of the APT is its revolutionary self-steering bogies and suspension system, which gives greater stability at high speeds and enables it to corner 50% faster than conventional trains. In Japan, they solved the problems of high speed on the famous Tokaido line by laying a completely new track. This enables them to achieve speeds of 130 miles an hour. But maintenance costs are very high, and British Rail decided to keep their existing track and to develop a new train. As well as new bogies, the APT coaches themselves will be able to tilt outwards on bends, making the journey more comfortable than on today's rolling stock and just as safe. Also, the revolutionary new braking system on the axle means that the APT, travelling at 150 miles an hour, can be stopped in the same distance as today's trains, a little over a mile. The driver sits well back in his cab, and his forward vision is limited to avoid the hypnotic effect of telegraph poles and sleepers flashing past at high speed. 2 APT prototypes are expected to be in service next year, and there could be a full passenger service by 1978. Meanwhile, in France, the APT is even more advanced. They call it the Turbotrain Très Grande Vitesse, or TGV. On this run, it's doing 170 miles an hour. The train is powered by 4 gas turbine engines, which were originally developed for French military helicopters. They power electric motors, which drive all the wheels throughout the train. Because the train travels at aircraft takeoff speed, many of the design features are the same as for planes. Smooth contours, for example, to cut down wind resistance and noise. A unique feature is the position of the bogies, which are not directly under the carriages, as in conventional trains, but under the couplings. This reduces the noise considerably, both inside and outside the train. Noise has been engineered out of the new train so successfully, in fact, that at 300 kilometers an hour, it is actually 20% quieter than an automobile doing 100 kilometers an hour or a jet at cruising speed. The Turbotrain is currently undergoing a long program of tests in the Bordeaux area in southwest France, where it has 50 miles of fairly quiet, mostly straight line. The driver has 5,000 horsepower under his control, and at speeds of up to 200 miles an hour, he has the same responsibilities as a pilot. At high speeds, his 4 separate braking systems can stop the train in about 2 miles. For the passengers, there's hardly any sensation of speed, and the interior design is almost identical to that of a modern jetliner. The French railwaymen claim their high-speed turbo train is 6 times cheaper than the European Airbus, and like the British, they're hoping to win passengers away from the airlines. The French are testing the train over a total of 500,000 miles, and if the trials are successful, it could be in full service in 6 years. As well as the Turbotrain, the French are developing an air cushion vehicle, similar in many respects to the hovertrain the British have just scrapped. The French call theirs the Aerotrain. The vehicle, which sits astride a concrete track, is capable of 250 miles an hour. It stops by means of wooden brake shoes which grip the track. Like the Grande Vitesse, the Aerotrain is powered by turbines, in this case 2 of them driving a single propeller. The difference is that it floats on a cushion of air created by air jets directed along the upright sections of the track. The current test vehicle, which can carry 80 passengers, has taken 6 years to develop. Early models reached high speeds of well over 200 miles an hour and travelled thousands of miles over a test track near Paris without encountering any basic mechanical or engineering problems. Throughout the whole development period, the major problem has been noise, and a great deal of research has gone into ways of cutting it down to acceptable levels, so that the turbine engines, which are efficient and cheap to run, can be retained as the means of propulsion. The French aren't saying whether the Aerotrain will supersede the Grande Vitesse as the rapid transit system for the 1980s, or whether both systems will be allowed to develop side by side. What is clear is that the withdrawal of the British from the very high-speed race means that France now has an undisputed world lead, and the rewards could be enormous.